This time I'd like to call the National Rocky Mountain Board of Education to order. I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, we adopt the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Sharp, second by Ms. Chavis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Motion carried. Before we go to item number 3, I'm going to ask the board, since we've got seats out there, if we don't mind moving out there so the big screen goes.
Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'll sit right here because I want to get some notes.
That's fine.
Where y'all going? Where y'all?
This time, item number 3, coming project management presentation, Mr. Davis.
Really quick, just a brief overview. At the last board meeting, I presented a request for qualifications for project management firm. We had 8 firms to submit to us. The committee shortlisted to 3 firms, and Cumming was selected. The board agreed to, at the last meeting, to hear Cumming's presentation, and at this time I'd like to call Mr. Whitley and Mr. Holstein for their presentation.
Mr. Davis, thank you very much. Dr. Burns, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen of the board, we certainly appreciate and delighted to be here. Delighted to have the opportunity to present to you essentially the same presentation that we presented a few weeks ago. And I'll go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Jeff Holstein. I serve as Executive Vice President of Cumming. The North and South Carolina, those 2 states are what I cover. Chris Whitley is with me today. He's the leader of our Raleigh office. And with that, I'll get started. This is the table of contents or format that we're going to use today. I'm going to spend just a few minutes telling you a little bit about who we are before we dig into item 3 and 4, which is really where we think we can bring the most value. A little bit about us. We've been in business for a little over 30 years. Now we're a national firm, a little over 700 people. We are just an owner's advocate. So we've got general contractors, licensed general contractors on our staff. We've got registered architects on our staff. We've got licensed professional engineers on our staff. But what we choose to do is be an owner's advocate, serving on your side of the fence the entire time, from the beginning of design to the end of construction. In the 30 years we've been in business, we've done a little over $7 billion in locally managed projects in these 2 states. Our 4 offices, as you can see, one in Raleigh, one a little below Charlotte and Fort Mill, one in Columbia, and then one down in Charleston. We're proud of the fact that we have about an 80% repeat customer rate. We get rehired, and in those 30 years, we've done hundreds of public sector projects. To illustrate a little bit more about the success we've had in doing a good job in getting rehired, the first column you see are areas where we've worked anywhere from 5 to 15 years. Anytime you work for that length of time, you've been hired more than once. Building programs generally last 3, 4, or 5 years, so we've been fortunate enough to be rehired for the next building program. Over on the right-hand side, excuse me, you'll see several areas in which we've worked for more than 15 years. While it's true that we have worked in some very large school districts, that's a little bit the exception. The norm is districts are more along the size of yours. And as you can see from some of the ones up here, I've called in tier districts. Based on number of schools and number of students, they're a little bit more, a little bit less, but this really represents the more common client that we've had over the past 29, 30 years. Talk just a little bit about our team. Start with an organizational chart. Chris Whitley, as I mentioned before, would serve as Senior Project Manager. His first line of support would include Jamie McKeon, who is a cost manager or estimator. We'll be talking more about the importance of that later in the presentation. Charlie Brown would be our site-based project manager, supporting Chris. Once the construction starts, whether that's 10, 11, 12 months from now, he would be the guy that would be on site all day, every day. And then Erwin White is one of our chief schedulers, and he would be the one to help us keep things on schedule and generate the schedules that we need to be effective. Behind those three are more in-house personnel that we have, more resources, should we need them. As I mentioned before, Chris will be serving as our Senior Project Manager. He's an engineering graduate from UNC Charlotte. Well, I guess it's just called Charlotte now. He is, in fact, the licensed general contractor, but here again, he's been with us a little over 20 years now. He's worked in a number of school districts. He's led the effort for us in a number of school districts, and I know he's excited about the opportunity to work here. Jamie McKeon is one of our chief cost managers here in the Raleigh office. He's got more than 18 years of cost estimating experience. His job is to stay on the market, to make sure he understands and is familiar with the cost of K-12 construction in our area. Charlie Brown, and yes, that really is his name, has been with us for about 12 or 15 years now. He's got more than 30 years of construction. At one time, he owned a steel erection company, and he has served as what we call a site manager. He's the guy that's out in the field coordinating with the contractors, making sure that the building is getting built in accordance with the plans and specifications produced by the architect and the engineer. I mentioned Erwin White. He's, again, our chief scheduler. He's got a wealth of experience. Just moved back to the East Coast from, I guess you can see from the first column there, he's had a lot of work over in California, but he is a master scheduler. Now for project approach, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Whitley for just a few minutes.
Jeff, again, we appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight, to talk about how we plan on managing this project, and that's kind of what I'm going to get into as we go through it. Every project is made up basically of 4 stages: the planning stage, the design stage, construction stage, and then the closeout stage. So we're going to kind of walk through each of those phases and highlight some things as we go through and try to explain a little bit more about what we do. But first off, in the planning stage, you'll notice we got leadership highlighted. We have that across all the stages. That's something that's we pride ourselves on carrying through and helping lead your project to a successful completion. Also, the site evaluation and cost options. I know that there's different ways that schools can be constructed, different sites potentially. In talking with Mr. Davis, we've heard there may be some potential for a different site here. So that's one of the things that we do during the planning stage. We'll do a site evaluation on each site and develop options. And then we'll build a cost model behind that so that we can weigh the cost between different sites or the different options, and also list out pros and cons. And then we'll wrap all of that information up and bring it back to you folks so that you can make an informed decision as to the best way to proceed. This is the basically a project management schedule. This is what we use kind of as our roadmap to get from the planning stage all the way through the construction stage. It's very high level. This isn't your detailed construction schedule. This helps us keep our architects on task and each get our bid period lined up right so that we're not conflicting with other major bids in the area. So we use this really as just our roadmap to get through the project. Market studies is another big portion of our planning phase. we have an in-house economics team that stays keyed in on local market conditions for us. So they'll be looking at labor rates in a particular region, labor shortages, material costs, that sort of thing. And we use all of that information as we go through design and construction to help make informed decisions to guide the design of the project. And then finally, just want to touch on transparent communications are really essential to any project, and that's something we take pride in and try to make sure those communications between stakeholders and elected officials. Oftentimes we'll develop a core team type concept that would include members of the school administration, county commissioners, and then of course board members. And we'll give periodic updates to keep them informed on how we're progressing with the project. As we move into the design phase, cost management obviously takes a major role. And we employ what we call continuous cost estimating. We don't just estimate at the major milestones, the schematic design, the design development. We're doing it continuously so that at any point in time, if a decision needs to be made, we're aware of the cost and can make the right decision for the school district. Constructability reviews and cost avoidance. This is basically how we can save you money. As we're going through this design, we'll create a sheet much like this one and offer cost avoidance items. These items might be the type of structure that we use. If masonry, load-bearing masonry is a good market and economical at that point in time, we may recommend that. We may recommend a steel structure. So it's those type of things that really don't change the functionality or quality of the building, but you can guide the design in the proper direction so that you can get the best value for your money. So this is just an example of one. The first column being, the potential savings for that item, and the second column is savings that are accepted. We don't make these decisions in a vacuum. We don't make the decisions, but we try to bring you the information so that you can make the proper decision. And you don't have to accept any of them, or you can accept all of them. This is just another example from a project where we started out. The architect had kind of planned on using modular or standard size brick on the building. Once we realized that, we recommend that we switch to utility brick, which is same functionality, everything's the same, it's just a little bit larger brick. And we were able to save them about $168,000 just on making that change, and anybody that walks in that building at any point in time will never know the difference. Another example of cost avoidance, this is a middle school in York, South Carolina, just south of Charlotte. The school on the left is a prototype middle school that before we got involved with this school district, they built on their own. It was back in 2007, and it cost about $26.8 million to construct when they built it. Fast forward a few years, and they hired us to come on and assist them with their building program, and they wanted to use that same design on a new site. So we took the drawings that they already had, since it was the same design, and went through a constructability and cost avoidance process through those drawings, and were able to save a substantial amount of money. It was $25.4 million when we bid it in 2014. So so it was about $1.4 million in savings 7.5 years later. As we move into the construction phase, project controls become very important, and we use software that we developed called CAP Analytics. It's basically, it controls all the financial side of the project. It's web-based. You'll have usernames and passwords that we can set anybody that the district so chooses on, so that at any point in time they can log into that system and get a snapshot of where the project is financially. This is just a kind of a screenshot of a project that we were working on that kind of shows the capability of the CAP system. Here's budgets versus actuals. We got our budgets in the second column, I guess it is, and then as we approve pay requests, it obviously deducts from that and gives you a budget balance so that we can track those costs.
If I could just say real quick, it's really a database of all the project expenses, and it can be sorted any way that you want to take a look at it. So You know, we can look at just one contract, or we can look at several contracts at a time. We can look at pay to date. We can look at amount remaining. So it's really good information in real time right at your fingertips, because we're updating it constantly. Every week, every month, as new information comes to us.
Can it be displayed as a visual as well?
Beg pardon?
Can it be displayed as a visual as well, graph, bar charts, graphs?
It can be, absolutely, yes. Yeah, and actually when you log on to a dashboard that displays it more along those lines.
Okay, thank you.
Here, this is sort of what you're talking about. This is the cash flow for this particular project. You can see the months along the bottom, the green line, maybe kind of a little hard to see the horizontal line across the top. That's the project budget. So you can see kind of how the cash is being spent across the life of the project. This is, as you drill down into the system a little bit more, this is the project, this is the pay request module, where you're actually logging all the pay requests, when they're received, when they were approved, so you can track down to each individual pay request. And finally, as we move to the closeout phase, again, leadership is very important in this phase of the project. You know, we've seen a bunch of times and heard horror stories from owners about how, you know, the job went good, but, you know, it took forever to close out, and they're still working on punch lists 6 months later. So it's real important that this portion of the project is managed properly. It takes the least effort overall, but it can make the biggest impact on the project as you go through. So basically, we have a closeout checklist that we use, excuse me, and we use this tool to make sure that we're keeping everything on task. We're going to push to get that punch list completed in a timely manner. We're going to push to get your as-built in a timely manner, because after, you know, once it's occupied, then maintenance has to take over that work. So they need the as-built. So there's an issue that at the school, when the contractor's not immediately available, they can go and address it. So all those things are really important as you get to the end. And then at about 11 months after you occupy the building, we'll come in and we'll have a meeting with the owner and maintenance staff, the contractor, and the architect, and we'll walk the building again. We'll make a list of warranty items that need to be completed so that we can wrap those up within the 1-year warranty period. I'm going to let Jeff talk some more about our experience.
We wanted to share a couple of projects with you that we think are similar in nature to yours, the one at hand today. The first one is Springfield Elementary School. It's a 67,000 square foot project. It's a new facility built on an existing site. So we had to deal with the school that was already there. Phase 1 was a Montessori school that opened first. Phase 2 was the Commons building in the middle. And Phase 3 was the new Springfield Elementary School itself. So quite obviously on a 3-phase project like that, with existing students on site, there had to be a lot of coordination with the principal and her staff, with maintenance, with operations, so that we could properly separate the students from the construction activity and make sure they were safe, because that is obviously the priority if you're building on a site that might have any students on it. Another one real quick, Del May Elementary School, a little larger school, about 115,000 square feet, 900 students. We provided a comprehensive facility study for it, and that's what yielded the number of size, the square footage, as well as the student size. The safety and separation of the construction activities were paramount, and I'm going to go to an aerial of this to give you a little better idea. On the left is obviously before, and I'm not quite sure why the person that helped me with the photograph cut the bottom portion off, but you can see the school on the left photo down in the bottom right hand side, and you can see the portables. But that was the existing school. You can see that the site work has begun. So obviously we had to provide barriers and separation. We had to provide vehicular access for the construction process, as well as keep buses and cars moving. So again, what you see on the right is a better view of what it looked like as a finished product. And where the old school was is now a detention area required by the state. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about some of the things that we do that aren't necessarily included in an architectural contract. Now, they may play a role in some of these things and they may help in them, but these are the kinds of things that are really on the owner side of the fence, and someone needs to carry the ball across the finish line. Chris mentioned earlier land acquisition and or due diligence associated with the land. There's a lot of things that go on behind that, a lot of evaluations to give you the information that you need to make the best decisions. Cost modeling. We really want to break the budget down into its component parts so that we can manage each part. Construction has 16, 17 divisions, from site work to concrete, steel, masonry, roofing, finishes. We want to set budgets for each one of those so that as the architect and his engineers begin to design, we have a target for each one of those component pieces. And I think we can manage small better than we can manage large, and give the architect and his engineer targets for those. At each stage, at each milestone date, schematic design, design development, and construction documents, we'll be doing reviews. We'll be conducting design review meetings with the architect and his engineer. We'll be, again, offering potential cost savings ideas, what we call cost avoidance. And the reason we call it that, I just want to take a minute and talk about that. During the design phase, we call it cost avoidance because we think if not for our involvement in that, those are dollars that would have found their way into the school, but the school wouldn't be any bigger. It'd be the same amount of square footage. So we're not trying to cheapen it in terms of the quality of the school, but we want to look at the market conditions, we want to look at the components, and make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. General contractor pre-qualification is something that some school districts utilize to try to sort of make sure that we've got the sort of quality of contractor that we want to have bidding the project. FF&E coordination, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. That's outside, in most cases, the scope of work of an architect or a contractor. And for those of you who have opened schools before, you know that last couple of weeks when the school's being finished and the furniture's trying to get loaded into the classroom and there's a bunch of cardboard boxes in the way, everybody's going a little crazy. So we want to help that whole move management happen more smoothly. So again, I don't want to bore you with all of these, but these are just an example of things that I think, it's not a redundancy of service, I guess is the best way to say it. So in summary, and we'll close with a few comments and we'll be happy to answer as many questions as you would like. As I said earlier, although we have licensed general contractors, Chris is one, licensed architects and engineers on staff, we choose to act solely as an owner's representative. We're not too big, we're not a couple thousand people firm, but we're big enough to have the resources to deliver you a quality project. A project team with excellent resources. We've done over 300 education projects here, over $7 billion worth in the Carolinas, a deep knowledge and extensive experience here locally. This next one is one that we really try to live by. Manage each project like we own it. If we do that, then we think like you're going to be happy and we know we'll be happy as well. Firm experience and qualifications. We've been ranked in Engineering News Record, which is one of the premier magazines of our industry, for the last 12 or 13 years now, inside the top 40. But when you drill down a little bit and look at the firms that only practice agency program management or agency project management, I'm not talking about firms that also have an architectural division or also a GC division. When you look at the ones that are just owners representatives, we're in the top 5. We represent the school district's interest in all phases of the project. And the one that you can't see in that board, but is probably one of the most important ones, is our goal on every single project we do, and we're able to do it nearly every time, is that the cost avoidance that we capture during design, the cost savings that we may capture during the construction phase is going to exceed our fee. This is a quote from one of our clients, Dr. Britt Blackwell, who's the chairman of the York County Council. We've done a little over $130 million worth of work there over several years, 11 projects. The cost savings realized so far is a little over $10 million, which is a little over 3 times our fee for that. So we're proud of that track record. We've been able to repeat that track record everywhere. We have every confidence that we can do that here as well. And with that, I would say thank you very much for your time and your patience in listening to this. And Chris and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the first slide where you had the 1, 2, 3 planning and all that stuff up there?
Getting there. Go to the number 1?
Yes, sir, if you would.
Sure.
All right. There seems that there's a few, I guess, repetitive costs. We've already paid for site evaluation and the economic stuff. Tell me how you would reduce that if you your price, if we take that stuff out, or is that just included in the price? Because we've already paid somebody to do the site evaluation as well as the economic growth and everything in that area.
Yeah, it's basically really included, and the piece that I think would bring the most value to you is we'll take the information that you've probably already obtained, and we will look at each of those site options and develop a cost model to attach it, a schedule to each of those, and then the list of pros and cons to help you make the best decision for the district depending on the option.
I feel like we're paying twice what I feel like. Not your fault, but that's just one of them.
Well, I'm assuming you've had your geotechnical explorations done. Is that what we're talking about in the evaluations?
We have none of that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't know a lot about the site, so we don't know if any environmental studies need to be done. Geotechnical exploration, go in drilling down to see what sort of bearing capacity that the soil has, so that, those are the things that help the engineers design the footings. So there could be, we realize you have some site options already, and you've gone through some due diligence, but we just don't know exactly where it is, so we put it up here as a service that we can provide if it's needed.
So if we could sort of, maybe Shannon, you could sort of bear some experience as far as what we've done and how that might.
Basically, what we've done as a district is we've done our school closing piece. We've gone through those processes, but as far as exactly picking a school site, that has not been done. So you can't do your soil evaluation. That's after we have this site is when you start doing that piece. Right now, we do not have a school site chosen. Right. So a lot of this can't take place until that takes place.
So I asked that question to you what Rick was talking about, so we can get some clarity what his question might be when he was talking about additional costs or additional costs.
And what's the time frame of this? Because if it was up to me, that's the district that I represent. I'd be out there tomorrow morning with a hard helmet, a shovel, at daybreak, but I know it's not gonna happen.
The time frame on the whole process?
On the, if we choose y'all and the selecting a site and stuff like that.
That could come together pretty quickly. I mean, if you have some, in terms of us putting together some cost options, that cost model that I keep talking to, I mean, obviously that's going to weigh into your decisions, but so we'll go out, we'll look at the sites individually and start get more information on, what the school needs are. Is it a 800 student school? Is it a 1,000 student school? And start building a cost model based on that, and then based on the sites and whether it's a tear down and replace, the cost could be drastically different between those two things. So, and then we'll look at it and lay out as plainly as we can the pros and cons between each option. But that can come together pretty quickly. I mean, month, 2 months, something like that, I would imagine.
I think your procurement code would play a role in that, because for project contracts of this size, I would think we would have to, you know, select the appropriate consultants in accordance with your procurement code. So those are the things that would drive the duration of that. But we would certainly make every effort to do it as quickly as possible.
How many projects y'all got going on right now?
In the
In reference
south,
to schools,
in the southeast,
just say North Carolina.
what?
6 under construction now. 6 right now under construction.
Any in the east of Raleigh?
No, sir.
Our cost estimate, I was just going to finish by saying our cost estimators sometimes work on projects that we're not actually doing the project management for. They may be providing cost estimates directly to an owner or to an architect. So I just say that to Seth. I think we've got a good representative of what the market is doing in this part of the state. Yes, sir.
Got 4 questions. So, in your project management, you show where you save out of your 5-year, 10-year, 15. What is the smallest savings you've ever had? Have you ever had a job that you didn't save any money? Or at least saved your fee?
I don't know that I could pull that off the top of my head without some research in all fairness. You know, I can tell you this, there's some architects that are more cost-minded during their design than others, right? And so for those ones that are really cost-minded, the cost avoidance that we find may not be as great as it is on other architects that might not be quite as cost-minded. So I would have to really do some research to go find it. Obviously, the smaller the project is, too, you know, the more difficult it can be.
So we are being told as a board that our architect can do all of this for us. Or propose that they can do. And that they can be done a lot cheaper. Just where we at. Can you debunk that? I mean, can you tell me that that's not true?
Well, I'll take the first stab at it, and you share your experience. I can only share with you my experience with it. The architectural contract, most architectural contracts pay the architect 80% of his fee during the design phase, okay? So if an elementary school project that may take a year to design and say a year and a few months to build, 80% of that fee has been realized at the end of the design phase, and 20% is left for him to provide what's called contract administration throughout the construction. And so I don't think that the contract that he signs, that an architect signs with an owner, really provides for management as we define it. Now, certainly, they go and they do some inspections, they write reports, they visit the project once every 2 weeks, once every month, whatever the contract calls for. But as far as daily management of the project, that's really not, in our experience, their responsibility. So that's the way I would answer that. You wanted to add?
Yeah, well, and Jeff mentioned the cost-minded architect. You know, if that's a big part during the design, you know, maybe you get lucky and you get a more cost-minded architect, but if you don't, then who is going to be sitting on your side of the table to help you identify these things that can save you money that if somebody walks in the building a year from now will never know it was even a change. So I think that, and then oftentimes we see with architects as you're going through design, not all architects, but some, that they'll start gradually falling behind schedule on that design. And honestly, every day you lose in design is a day you lose in construction. So, you know, if you already have I have no idea what your schedule you would be looking at, but if you already have a tight schedule, say you're supposed to open in the end of July and you lose a month's worth of time during design, well, you're going to be pushing right up to when you want students in the building. So there's a lot of stuff, and Jeff ran kind of through the list of other services that we offer. You know, in my experience, most architects, when they're providing you with the estimate at the different phases of the project, it's not the takeoff that we do. I mean, we're counting bricks, blocks, yards of concrete, right there, everything, and theirs is more of a square foot cost. So it's going to be tougher for you to have a good idea of the cost of that school early on and later into the design. Until you're really not going to know till you get to bid day.
in your proposal, I think you made, I read, the 622,000 would be the most. I'm looking for the least. What do I do to get the least? I mean, how do I, and I'm gonna kind of echo what Ricky was saying. Am I understanding you to say it's all or nothing? I mean, is there anything I can say we don't need?
Let me explain a little bit how I put pricing together. We are people over time, right? So we made some assumptions, again, not knowing exactly how this school is going to be programmed. We don't know if it's going to be, we've heard 700, we've heard 800, we've heard 900. I'm not sure. Well, the size of the student body is going to affect the size of the school. The size of the school is going to affect the duration of construction. So what we have assumed for purposes of our pricing that we delivered to Mr. Davis was about a year's worth of design, a couple of months to get through bid and award and board approval, and then I think 14 or 15 months of construction time. Now, if we end up with a project that can be done in less time than that, then yes, that 622 would reduce. But go ahead.
So, help me understand, I think I picked up on something you said, you, like compaction tests, things of that. We've got to pay that regardless. Whether we pay ABC Engineering or we pay you, so is some of that.
You will not pay us for
that.
that.
Right.
We would procure that service.
You're going to procure the service, but we're still going to pay for the service and you to procure it.
Correct.
So some of that 622 will not eliminate any fees anywhere else, yes or no?
No, you are correct.
That's my fault.
You got it. Yes, ma'am.
A point that I would like to address is the change orders.
Sure.
I remember that when we did a facility, we had a lot of change orders. And if I remember correctly, and I think I do, it shot the cost up way over the budget that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Am I understanding you to say that with your services, the probability of change orders go down?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
That in and of itself will save us a whole lot of money.
Yes, ma'am. Part of what I touched on just briefly, the constructability review, that involves drawing coordination, and the lack of drawing coordination often results in these change orders that you probably saw. Now, there's always a potential for unforeseen conditions when you get out there. But those type of things, those constructability reviews that we're going through all the way through the design of the project, we're eliminating as many of those as we can possibly find. So that's part of it. And then as you get into construction, you're going to have an advocate on your side that's going to make sure those costs are in line with real costs. So as a change order is submitted, a change order request is submitted from the contractor, we're going to have our team looking at those costs and make sure it's really in line for what it costs, because that's not always the case. I mean, in change orders, oftentimes they'll try to inflate those. So we're going to be negotiating on your behalf on all of those change order requests as well.
And to me, that's very important.
Yes.
I don't know much about construction, but my monitor, you mentioned before, you know, and I agree with Ms. Bullock, we had a lot of change orders in our last construction. And to me, change orders equals corruption chances. And I'm impressed by the number of repeat business that you've had. I don't know of any program management that's been done in Nash County for anything. But evidently, you must be able to save your fees on a lot of your building and all. You would not be recalled to do more building.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, and we'll keep track of that cost savings log the whole way through. So you're going to see it, and we can show it to you however often you want us to be presenting. We'll have that log with us, so you'll be able. And they're gonna be real items. I mean, so we will have that in front of you, and we'll sit down and review it with you at the end. I mean, our goal, and it rarely ever happens that we don't do it, is to save more than our fee.
One of the things we discussed, one of the things we discussed with Mr. Davis and his committee during the original presentation was the need for us to come in here and understand your design guidelines, the standards you expect in your school. And once we do that, you know, I think that'll guide us in the kind of recommendations we make on cost estimates. That's really rule number one for us. Yes, sir.
I think we all kind of speak to change orders. We understand there's associated costs with that. Would you just take a minute to kind of give us a very high level of what it is in our ability to approve it or not approve it? I mean, who has the final say? Just because there is a change order, is it going to happen? I mean,
well, but the change order is any increase to the scope of work
Or decrease.
Or decrease. I'm sorry. Yeah, good. We usually worry about the increase. Increase to the scope of work above and beyond what's shown in those drawings and specifications. I think we all understand that. So, and there's a couple different kinds. I mean, we've had school districts decide, well, you know what? We're going to need to build 2 more kindergarten rooms on this building, even though we're barely out of the ground. So we'll get a price. So that's a owner-directed addition. In other cases, there may be an addition renovation project, you know, just some things you can't see because you're not paying the architect to go in and sort of tear into the whole building. He's doing the best he can. You may run into some unforeseen conditions that are outside the scope of the work. Well, the difference at that point is on bid day, the contractor was giving you competitive prices. He knew he had to beat other contractors to get awarded the job. And now he's not. He's giving you a price for this change in work. And we just want to ensure that it's as close to the market price as it can be and that you're not overpaying for this additional work. So whether it's an owner-added change at some point during the project, or I'm not going to say we can catch everything in the drawings. We're not, there's no such thing as a perfect architect, and as often as we review drawings, there may be something that gets biased somewhere. But if and when that happens, we're going to make sure that you're only paying for what's extra.
and who has the who signs on the bottom of that either says, no, I'm sorry, you said you would do it for that amount, it needs to be done for that amount, or no, I'm sorry, we don't need that additional structure, that additional tower, that additional...
Ultimately, it would be a board decision.
Right.
It would come to us.
Yes. And we'd have to look at your procurement code, but I'm sure your procurement code probably calls for any change over $50,000 or maybe over 100 get board approval. So yeah, I mean, you would be up to speed on anything like that, but you would ultimately get to make a decision, yea or nay.
Thank you. Just clarity on that.
Sure.
Appreciate you sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
1996 General Assembly mandated DPI keep on their in stock, and it's on their website, prototype schools. Right now for elementaries, there are probably 35 schools listed on their website. Some of them are dated as far back as the early 90s. Some of them have been as recent as 2016. Have you ever done a project in North Carolina that utilized prototypes, either listed or similar ones that an architect had?
Yeah, we have done that before. The older ones in particular, we haven't used one of the ones from DPI's website, but our architects oftentimes, they may have a prototype on the shelf, and that's a good way to save money. What you have to be careful of is if it's a 2013 design, then they are going to have to take some time and go through, and we're going to take some time to go through to make sure that everything is up to date code-wise, because the codes change so often. You can't necessarily just say, roll that set of plans out, send it to the bidders, because you're not going to get everything that you need code-wise in a 5-10-year-old prototype design. But oftentimes, architects can come to the table with designs that they've used in other places that you may like, and that's a real potential to save you some architectural fee.
In another district, second question, in another district, in 2011. I was bidding a $20 million 900 student high school. I know it's 8-9 years ago. We had 28 architects. It was in the midst of the recession. And we ended up getting the architect that designed current holders. Is that the name of the? Current. We scaled that that school down for 900 students, and the architect charged us 4%. Of course, again, it was very competitive. We were able to suspend the our whatever what is it, the requirements that you do qualifications rather than price. We were actually able to do price. Since then,
so you did an RFP instead of an RFQ.
RFQ, yes. We were able to do an RFP. Since then, they changed the law. You can't do that anymore. The way we did it, but so we were able to get pretty much a prototype school, not on the website, but for 4% architect fees. What would you say in this market are your typical architect fees that you're seeing these days?
For a brand new design, I would say probably 6.5 to 7.5. For a prototype, probably 4.5 to 5.5. Really? And that's kind of it's kind of a range because it depends on the prototype, right? I mean, and the architect, but part of what we would do if we were to come to work for you, we would help you procure those architect services. We'll help you with that RFQ to pre-qualify and sit through that. And then you can negotiate with an architect the same way you can negotiate with us or a contractor or anybody else. So we will do our best to get you the best bang for the buck, whichever type of design you look to pursue.
Good. That's all I have. Thank you.
One thing that's key here is transparency. Just making sure that not only our board tracks what's going on, but also our constituents, what's in Nash Rocky Mount area. So I know our folks are very concerned about that with the dollar amount that's going on. One of the things I like, you talking about that cap system that you use to track that. What I was hoping I could see was actually a realistic timeline that maybe you did with the previous school from start, when you did your geographic works on the groundbreaking, down to the finish, how much you track, and I'm sure you do a cost avoidance table as well as a cost save or cost analysis as far as what you did with those. Do you have anything here you can show us that what you've done? I know I saw a timeline with one item.
Not that, in terms of timeline, I think Jeff said we kind of made some assumptions for what we were doing.
Is that what you're?
Is this? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So just real quickly, this is actually several projects.
Yes.
And again, this is a very high level schedule. The green represents, well, I shouldn't say that, but most of it on the left hand side represents what needs to be done from a design standpoint, from an agency approval standpoint, and those kind of things. Again, this is not the contractor schedule where he puts a window in here and a roof in over there. But this is the guideline that we follow from front to back, and we can cost load these schedules. Okay, so you can have it, and we do this all the time. We have an expected cash flow based upon historical data. When you're coming out of the ground, we expect a certain percentage to be spent in the first month, the second month, the third month. And really, one of the ways you can determine whether you're on schedule or not is not just looking at the days, but looking at your project expenditures over that amount of time. If you're $1 million behind on your expenditures, you're probably behind schedule. And we can track cost-loaded schedules like this. I think that's what you're
absolutely referring to. What I'm looking for, this side is what I call Gantt chart. It actually shows the actual cost to the proposed cost and also the timeline. So there's a visual that whether it be a constituent or a board member or whoever can see that and not necessarily and actually a visual idea and have a true picture of where we are and what we say and with the alignment with that project itself.
Right. I know it's kind of cumbersome to get all the way back through these slides, but the cash flow slide that you saw earlier was just a actual to that point, but we have a projected cash flow, and I wish we would have shown that one. It's a little bit more of a bell curve, right? I mean, it's a lot of expenditure and then it tails off at the end. So we can look at where we are actual versus where we plan to be and get a pretty good assessment of where we are schedule-wise that way as well. So this is information that's available in CAP Analytics. Again, if you got a username and password, you can look at it.
Because a lot of folks, like myself, we're not maybe familiar with all the high-tech terms that you may use. We want to keep it simple so the average person on the street can take a look at that and understand what's going on with this.
Well, and another thing we like to do is, we'll come and give you a monthly board report all the way through. And we customize that report to what you need. So that'd be something we'd want to sit down with you and superintendent and make sure that we have the report in the proper format. And oftentimes, a lot of our clients will post that on their website or whatever so that the community can keep up with and track how the project is progressing.
Or whatever frequency you want.
Right.
Every month, every other month, every quarter, it's up to you. Yes, sir.
When you feel that your project is accomplished, how hard is it to get you back if something's wrong?
Phone call.
Not hard at all.
All right, but when is it that you wash your hands of the project?
We never do because we want you as a client the next time you build something. I've gone to projects that we finished 10 years ago to look at an issue that the client might feel like was sort of a latent defect and try to help get it resolved.
At what price?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Have you experienced a lot of that in your time?
Not a lot. Not a lot. But you know, one of the things about building a brand new facility is you might think when the construction team walks out of it is perfect, and then you put 900 kids in there flushing toilets and shutting doors and opening lockers, and some things reveal themselves that you may not have known about. So there can be some weekend work during that first month of school to tighten those things back up and make sure that they're running. A lot of times you don't know if the air conditioner is running right until you put 700 young bodies in there and make sure it's operating, because you just don't have that many construction guys on site. So that first month of operation, Chris can tell you, we're there, we're a phone call away, hopefully just an hour away or less. And in fact, the guys like Charlie Brown that I mentioned earlier are usually with you during that first month to 2 months of occupancy, because he's engaged in the closeout procedures, getting you the drawings you need for as-built, getting the owner's manuals and things of that nature for all the different components. And he's tending to these things that reveal themselves during that first month. So that's not unusual at all.
Did I understand you to say that before the warranty period is over, that you will come back?
Yes, ma'am. At about 11 months after it opens, we will schedule a meeting to have everybody involved there so we can walk the building, we can talk with the principal, what issues are you having, talk with maintenance, what issues are you having, and we're going to put all of that stuff on the list so that we can then have the contractor make any repairs that are necessary or any changes that are necessary within that 1-year warranty period.
Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to wait till 11 months if something goes wrong.
No, absolutely not. Again, we're phone call away.
Yes.
A lot of that stuff, when we award a contract to a contracting company, the builder, the as-built, the warranty walkthroughs, the maintenance issues that fall through, in my experience, typically the superintendent is on site. He is our go-to with us. They follow through because they're not going to get paid. We're not going to pay them 100% until that stuff's right. Why do I pay them annually?
Quite honestly, I'll just be candid. Once that once that general contractor signs that contract, they don't have a responsibility to look after your best interest anymore.
When you get paid, they will.
Well, yeah.
I mean, typically you put in a contract somewhere in there, we're gonna hold some percentage, hold
Absolutely,
some
the retainage, yep.
a retainer until we meet that punch list.
Right.
Is satisfied.
Right, that's exactly right, but our folks will be there. I mean, a contractor can do things that you don't see if somebody's not there watching. And they can take shortcuts, and our guy is gonna be there every day, gonna make sure those shortcuts don't happen. He's here to look after your best interest, during that whole time the project's going on. So all of those type of things, and then he's gonna be the guy, you know, Mr. Davis isn't gonna be trying to chase down the general contractor superintendent, you know, to get this punch list done. Our guy will be doing that for Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of times a little bit of human nature takes over, right? I mean, there's a next job somewhere, and the enthusiasm about finishing the last one can languish a little bit. And so we will make sure that doesn't happen. We're gonna wrap it up and ensure that you get all that you're supposed to get before that final retainage is issued.
One more question about sewage. 2 of the 3 schools do not have municipal sewage, and the one site that does is a potential site, and there's been talk about going out a half or a mile or so from that extend sewage out further. Do you know of any schools being built this day and age? And will the state allow schools to be built without connection to municipal sewage? Or is it almost
we've done
a necessity?
We've done some schools in our history before that we have to install a pump station, you know, to move.
To connect it to
That's
it.
correct.
Right, yeah.
And that can be a quarter mile, half a mile.
But nobody builds them anymore that.
Well, certainly you don't want to have to, because that's an expense, and a fairly sizable expense that you wouldn't incur if you could utilize your municipal. So oftentimes that can drive site selection a little bit,
right,
particularly given the length of the run that would need to be made.
That's exactly the type of thing as we look at these sites, and develop options for you that you'll see in the cost between the various sites.
I think Mr. Lamb's question is, can you build without municipal water, municipal sewer?
Yes.
And dump it there without pumping it?
But you have long-term costs,
Yes.
continuing costs.
Yes.
I would have to be more
Yes.
familiar with.
Yeah.
The state will allow you to do that, I guess. That's really what I'm asking.
If your property perk's good enough to meet the toilet counts in the building, I mean, that's.
And you have to have a spray
Yeah,
field,
I mean,
or do you pump it away?
Right.
But why would we even consider a site that we know up front that we will have a recurring cost?
You would.
Because of the site, that would be stupid.
And that would be, when I talk about the pros and cons and these site options, that would be a con that we would display for you plain as day, so you would know, hey, if we choose this site, we may have this going forward.
And that's one of the reasons we've not chosen a site yet.
Quick question, keep this as much as you can, I understand. As many schools and systems that y'all have worked in, have there ever been instances where you've either been pulled off of it after initially beginning it, or come to it after construction has begun? And can you give us any detail as to kind of the circumstances that surrounded either of those?
I can't think of any project that we've been pulled off of that we've started, but we have in our history been brought in to a project that was already underway, usually after construction has started. And that's, you know, that's kind of late, but, you know,
sure,
the ox is in the ditch and they're looking for help to get it out. And obviously, if we don't get brought in until that late, the opportunity for some of that design phase cost avoidance is gone, but at this point, they're just worried that the school district may just be worried about finishing on time and not having change orders escalate beyond the budget. And so there have been a couple instances like that in our history where we've been brought into projects.
Can you remember, were you taking over from another project, or were you taking over in a situation where?
Normally one without a project management group. It's just a regular design, bid, bill, owner, architect, contractor.
I can tell you I'm familiar with the situation where a district hired a project manager and the architect came in and convinced the school district that they didn't need the project manager. I think y'all are familiar with the firm. And so they negotiated to get that project manager out of the project. That's never happened to y'all?
No, sir. Yes, sir.
It just appears to me that this is a win-win situation for our school board with the fact that, having seen the presentation, I'm feeling very comfortable that the best way for us to go, I would think as a board, my opinion, would be to have someone who has the best interest for us, who stands in the gap to make sure that this thing is done right, and they take full responsibility for what could happen. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
That's my opinion.
One last question. You talked about four or five different team members that you have. You talked about your scheduler, you talked about your cost manager, you talked about your site-based project manager, and then your senior project manager, correct, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Just go over briefly for me the job responsibility of a schedule. You call it NP a master schedule. Tell me what his or her role would be there.
They're going to develop this initial management plan that we talked about that we put up here a second ago. They're going to develop that, number one. But then as we start getting schedules from the contractor, and they'll be updating that monthly, our scheduler will also be looking at those and doing his own updates to make sure that, you know, a schedule, and I've done a good bit of scheduling in my career. A schedule you can play around with it, make it tell whatever story you want if you don't know what you're doing. Or if the people you're presenting it to don't know anything about it. So he will be back checking the contractor schedule as we move forward, making sure that the items on the critical path are in line where they should be. And they're not just moving bars around, activities around.
Yeah, checking the logic on it to make sure it makes sense.
Makes sense. And your cost managers?
Our cost manager will be the guy he's looking at the market, he's looking at the labor rates, he's looking at the material cost, and he's going to be the one that's going to assist with our continuous estimating. I mean, he's going to be the one that's going to be, him and his team. There's probably 4 people behind him, but he'll ultimately be the one responsible for that estimate.
So at least 3 different times, schematic, design development, and 95% CDs. They're going to take that project off, Jamie and his team, are going to take that project off just like they were general contractor. Chris mentioned it earlier. A detailed material takeoff so that we understand exactly what's in the project, exactly what each portion of it costs.
The reason I asked that question because at some point in time, your team sits down together and go over, and I'm assuming the schedule with the cost manager, with your site project, and said, this is what we got, this is how our schedule is running, this is dollars that we're saving, we need to report out. Is that what I'm hearing?
Say that last part again.
I'm sorry. So typically with the team, what I'm looking at here, your schedule is making a schedule. When you got your cost managing your cost, if Ms. Ed says, I've got this, and he says, no, I think that price is too high, but this is what we looked at. You're sitting down back with the schedule, looking at that timeline we had, making adjustments to that timeline so we can actually see actual versus what the proposal would be. Sure. So that team is meeting together on a regular basis, sure, updating each other.
Sure. Absolutely.
I got one last question.
That's fine.
Sounding a little unorthodox, but $600,000+, and I drop from the slot machine and I pull the handle. What's your odds of me winning with you? And getting my 600 and another 600 back?
Very good.
Percentage?
Oh, I can't do that.
60, 75?
Well, I can tell you what our history has been, probably 90%.
I think you talked to that question earlier, right, when you said as far as what your cost would be, so you did get to that point as far as what you've returned on what we've invested and what your return would be. I think you showed a bigger number earlier, and you talked about recouping the cost of what it would cost us to cost you.
Right, I mean, that one simple prototype that Chris showed earlier, just bringing it in $1.4 million underneath what it was, 7 years before. That was well in excess of our fee to manage that money. So we're confident we can do it.
I personally would like to thank you for coming in tonight and enlightening us and also our constituents on what we're undertaking. I know something like this has never been, to my knowledge, done in Nash County, let alone a school system. And I take it the reason you've been in business 30 years and you haven't been maybe in North Carolina as long is because of your repeat business in South Carolina. Is that true?
Absolutely.
That's true. It kept us busy for a long time, but like a lot of companies, we wanted to try to grow.
Well, I want to thank you for the presentation tonight.
Well, thank you for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we appreciate the opportunity to perhaps be involved in this exciting project. So thanks again, and hope to see you soon.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Sharp. Second by Ms. Bullock. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.